How often do you proactively plan uncomfortable risk? Hey ladies, I'm back. And today I'm really excited to share a podcast with you. It's a podcast episode that I did with Morgan Ruff. Morgan has been on the podcast previously. She's also a coach within my Mastery and Mastery Business coaching community. And Morgan actually came to me, probably about 4 years ago as a client. And we grew really close. She started working on my team and actually became a mentor of mine. And this is something that I absolutely love. I'm a huge advocate of women helping women. And it's extremely humble when you see your area of expertise and you can serve somebody in that capacity, and that also she had something to give me. Morgan is a nature lover. She talks a little bit about herself at the beginning, so I'll let her introduce herself as well. I would call her an environmentalist. She is huge in salmon restoration. She's very connected to the earth. And what I love about Morgan is she can see nature and life and seasons and has a way of helping the human spirit restore itself. And about, let's say 3-4 months ago, Morgan asked me if I wanted to go on a trip with her to Alaska. And I immediately said yes. And Alaska was never on my bucket list. It wouldn't be my first place in the world to go and see. And there were many reasons why I said yes. But one of the main reasons I said yes was because when would I ever get the opportunity again to go on an adventure with a woman who is so incredibly passionate about the land and could also give me an experience that I wouldn't be able to buy? So I said yes. And in this conversation, Morgan and I talk about the ups and downs as women with children, running lives post-COVID, and what it was like mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually to get ourselves there. And then also the lessons that we had to go through while we were there. And many times throughout this journey, I told myself many, many things, but one of the reasons why I said yes to it was because I wanted to say yes to the mental challenge. Being off the grid for a week, challenging myself to be completely present, and more importantly, saying yes to something and completing it and having no way out. Anytime I'm teaching about emotional intelligence or accomplishing a goal or, changing your identity or becoming the person that you truly want to be in your life, that takes courage and it takes risk. The risk of the unknown, the risk of what if I got hurt, the risk of travel, the risk of leaving my family, so many risks. And it was interesting for me because I had a lot of physical and emotional reaction to this trip the same way that I did to my cancer journey. And I realized for the first time, I hear a lot of people say to me, yeah, but you had cancer. And I never had anything bad like that happen to me. And, so that gave you an edge, or it gave you an opportunity to really take back control of your life. And I always say to them, why are you waiting for something outside of you to stop you in your tracks and take back control of how you want to feel? And when I said yes to this opportunity, I think it was actually really beneficial to say yes to a friend who can hold me accountable to what I committed to. Because going through this with her, I realized oftentimes it's so easy to distract ourselves and tell ourselves why we can't finish something that we started because our children are distractions, or work, or the weather, or whatever, insert life circumstance. But when you are in the middle of something and you are backed into a corner and you have one goal, and your goal is to survive, your goal is to get out, your goal is to, paddle, just keep paddling, go to the next campsite, get to the next mile. Just like if you're in a run or something like that, the only way out is through. So let's dive into today's podcast. I would love to hear from you. I want to know what your aha moment was from today's episode. I think it's actually really important to reflect, and something that I try to do with this community is to engage with you and not just spew information at you. So there's multiple ways that you can connect with me personally. One is through our community phone number. It's solely used for the podcast in this community. So text 313-710-5199. That's 313-710-5199. You can also send me a private message on Instagram at Heather Chauvin, spelled Chauvim. Or I would love it if you took a screenshot of this episode, tagged me on social media, and shared it with a friend as well. It truly makes an impact, because I believe the more women who come alive, who listen to their deep desires and do the emotionally uncomfortable work, are the ones that are going to change the world. So let's dive in. All right, here we are, the much anticipated conversation with Morgan Ruff. I'm sitting outside, so we may hear some birds or traffic, and I'm going to cross my fingers that no children or people show up at my door. Maybe Amazon will drop off a box. Who knows? This is life. And for those of you who don't know, Morgan invited me to an adventure, and I said yes without asking any of the details. So today we're going to be talking about lessons and just all of that. So Morgan, I'm going to give you the microphone for a minute on just, we've talked a lot, obviously, on the trip about turning ideas into things. And first of all, desires into ideas and ideas into things. So just maybe setting the stage a little bit for those who aren't familiar with you, or those who are also like, why? What was the desire?
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Heather. And thank you so much for having this conversation. I always love these deep conversations and reflections of these really magical experiences. So a little bit about me. So all of my 20s, I was a guide and a naturalist in the Southeast Alaska, the Tongass National Forest. And it was a place that really spoke to my heart and has really set me on a path of really love and connection to nature. And it's a very, very wild place. There are bears and whales and trees, and feels just like you're soaking into the soul of the earth. It's also a rainforest, as we learned on our adventure. So I did this all through my 30s 20s. And then as I hit my 30s, I started to reorient my life toward doing stuff that was a little bit more close to home as I started to transition into motherhood and wanting to, have a home and all the things that come along with that. And after this last year of being a mom to young children in the pandemic, I gave my heart and soul to my family. It was a very drastic reorientation for me. I mean, I've always been a family person. I've always loved my kids and all that, but I was often a little bit more straddling my professional life, doing salmon recovery in the Puget Sound here, and then as well as my family life. And so I always had an orientation that was a little bit outward toward my career. And during the pandemic, I made a very conscious choice to really switch that and really care for my family, my children, my husband. And I luckily work in a situation where they were very supportive of that reorientation and allowed me to find that space. And it was magical and important, and I'm really glad that I did that. But with it came this sense of kind of being stuck and not really being able to fully embrace and orient around this adventurous side of myself, this side of myself that really craves wild places and wild experiences. And it wasn't until last spring, I believe it was spring of 2021, I host these quarterly nature-based retreats where I invite people to spend some really quiet, deep reflection time in nature. And I also do this because it's important for me. And I was sitting on the beach in the rain, journaling, and I had this overwhelming feeling, thought, desire, emotion that said, go back to Alaska, go back to Alaska. And of course, my mind comes up. I'm like, I can't do it. We're still in a pandemic. I can't leave my kids. Nobody will want to join me. All the different things that come up. But it was just persistent and constant. Go back to Alaska, go back to Alaska. And so I began to follow the breadcrumbs, really. I just started to reach out to different people, do a little bit more research, really think about what it is that I wanted, what type of experience I was craving. And over the months, it just slowly manifested. And we were able to return to Alaska, to a place that is really important to me. It was a place that really has a very spiritual meaning to me. And just spend a week paddling on our own, totally self-supported, off the grid with women. And it was a very magical experience. But that's really, like, for me, how it came to be. I finally heard that whisper. I allowed myself to get quiet and still enough for a moment that it fully expressed itself. And then instead of shoving it down like I would have normally, I got curious and I explored it. And I thought, well, what is this telling me? Why am I craving this? What does it mean to leave my children? What does it mean to really sink myself back into this adventurous side of myself? And it was quite the experience.
Yes, it was. And I think you just said, hey, do you want to come to Alaska? And I said, sure. And I didn't really I didn't ask a lot of questions. People were like, where are you going? What are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. And I think that's because I have a lot of trust in you. You and I have gone on an adventure before. Actually, you said that was like my intro adventure. I think you were just testing me to see if I was capable. Like, you were prepping me for Alaska. And yeah, this conversation, I wanted to chat about one. I mean, you already said it, right? You're like, there's a soul desire there. You've been in my world for a while, and I know you're a huge advocate of this, but we can be in our roles, right? Our roles as woman, our roles as mother, partner, employee, business owner, and then just fall in this like masculine do. And then we're burnt out, and then we put our head up and we're like, am I alone? Am I alone? And then oftentimes women are creating connection through their trauma and creating connection through their burnout and their disconnect, which is what we see on social media, which is something that I have consciously made a decision to leave and kind of exit out of consciously. Like, every time I see it, I just mute or unfollow. I don't spend a lot of time in that space of like, look how awful my life is. Look how burnt out I am. Look how shitty, the pandemic has made XYZ. I'm always asking the question, how can I, and what are you going to do about it? Like, What are you, like, solution oriented? So when you asked me, I don't know why I said yes, to be honest with you. I'm always, you kept asking, or the other ladies kept asking, like, would you do this again? And I was like, I don't know. I think for me, when I say I don't know, I think, of course I would, but I think for me, it's the excitement of the unknown and learning a new skill. But I was very much, when I say uncomfortable, I don't just mean physically uncomfortable. I put myself in an environment that I wouldn't have consciously chosen myself, being in a rainforest and in a constantly wet environment is not my number one. Paddling in deep water with whales is not my number one, with, knowing there was a lot of fear.
Yeah.
But I love putting myself in situations where I'm also don't have to lead all the time. Mm-hmm. And I told you up front that, a different side of me will show up. I'll be very quiet. I'll be very observant. I might ask a lot of questions. And then I get to really pay attention of who I am when I'm not in my area of genius, right? When I'm in an uncomfortable situations, it's almost like taking the mask off and seeing what's underneath that. So it reveals a lot, but I loved the adventure and just having to figure things out as I went, and also having to go through something like when you literally don't have an option to back out once you're there. So let's talk about, from listening to you, you had a lot of previous experience with this, so it wasn't all new to you, but I know for you, there was a lot of preparation physically getting there. So talk about that, because there's a lot of mindset stuff that comes up.
Oh yeah, totally. It's all mindset. And what I found fascinating is, even though I have been there for many years and I have done a kayaking trip in this place before, it was a whole new slew of mindset work that I had to do in order to get myself from concept and idea all the way through to, to actually showing up and being there. And what I really realized is, like, the majority of the work is in the time before you actually set out for your adventure. And once you get there, it's easy for me. Like, once I'm there and in the moment paddling, like, my mind was clear, I was calm, I was so present. But getting there that wasn't the case. Like, I really was very terrified. And there were a lot of different things that were coming up. Of course, the mom guilt of, well, who am I to leave my family, inconvenience my husband, and, ask them to, give me this space to do something as selfish as, like, going for a week-long paddle. How dare I? So that kind of narrative about who I'm supposed to be as a mom and how I'm supposed to show up on my family. And obviously this type of experience really challenges that, that thought or that perception. So going through that was really interesting, but there was a lot about, asking you to come with me and knowing that you were putting all your trust in me. And my mind really likes to catastrophize. It's like something that I've always done in my life. So of course I have to manage the thoughts about all the things that could go wrong. What if the kayak tips? What if a whale breaches on Heather like she's afraid of? What if an iceberg, rolls and takes us out? What if, blah, blah, blah. What if a bear comes in and destroys our camp? What if? What if there's an earthquake and there's a tsunami, which I don't know if you know this, but the night before we arrived in Alaska, there was an earthquake and there was a tsunami warning for the entire area that we were in.
Nobody said that, thank God.
So anyway, but all these things, obviously, we can manage when we're out there. And it's really just my mind doing a future trip and trying to keep me safe. And so every time that catastrophizing spiral started to come up, I had to actively question my thoughts. And sometimes I even allowed myself, well, what if that happens? Okay, well, then we do this, and then we do that, and then we do that. And I allowed myself sometimes to go through a full solution set to help me to get all the way through. And then other times I'm like, oh gosh, like, is it true that that's going to happen? Like, is that really something you need to worry about? And a lot of times I would come back to it. So lots of questioning my thoughts and my feelings and really catching myself in the moment when I was having that catastrophizing thought and bringing it back into, like, what is the reality here? And, instead of future tripping, bring it back to this moment and know that you can do that also if you are in a situation in the moment where things are going wrong.
I think this is a really important point. Part of the reason why I want to have this conversation with you is you are a coach inside of our community. And we talk a lot about beliefs and mindset. But beyond that, two questions came up from people. Why would you do that? And, oh, I'm jealous and envious. Like, I could never, right? The people that were like, that's not my thing. And then the others that were like, that is my thing. And I could never give myself permission to do that. And then there's this buildup of anger and resentment and, must be nice that other people get to do that. And not everyone is in the position to be able to do that, but it doesn't mean that can't happen to you next year. Like it could be a future thing. But you had this desire, and I brainwashed you enough to know that desire equals soul fulfillment. And when you go for desire, there's a part of you that becomes full. And when you become full, you become more fully self-expressed. And then when you return, you are more present. And then there's a whole bunch of things that you can't predict that would come out of that. But it was like the second you chose to step into desire, the brain does what it does to keep you safe. And I tell people this all the time. And it could be a program that you're investing in. It could simply be like going for a 10-minute walk. I didn't have any of that. I actually probably had guilt and all of that. But I also felt a lot of pressure. I felt a lot of like not enoughness because I didn't know what to do in help of the preparation. And you kept saying like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. So I felt like I wasn't doing enough or I didn't want to disappoint. But I was mentally putting a lot of trust in everybody else because I was I don't want to say the dumbest person in the room, but there is that quote, like always be the dumbest person in the room so you can grow and expand. Because I wasn't an expert, right? So I couldn't show up with like ego and confidence. It was like, I'm like, starting a new school with my shiny backpack with tags still on it. And I'm like, okay, I'm here, guys. Like, tell me what to do, which is a vulnerability in itself. But yeah, so our desires were very different of why we said yes to this opportunity. And so much of that. And we didn't talk about contrast as well of not only contrast within us of like those thoughts or the guilt, but the contrast we receive from other people when we choose to go after our desire. And some of it I didn't even see as contrast. Because I wasn't confident in it, I would ask you questions and you'd be like, oh, Heather, yeah, every man has said the exact same thing to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it was coming just from men or something like that. So the contrast from other people, whether they're in our inner circle or outer circle, I could see the impact that played as well when you're really leaning towards what you want.
Yeah. And I just think about how many people reflected back to us. You're a group of women going out into the wilderness. Well, are you bringing a gun? What are you doing for bears? And just that projection of their own fear and belief about what women can do in the wilderness and that women shouldn't be out there on their own. And I'm like, it's 2021. Are you kidding me that this is still a belief that people are holding and having? And how many
and just exchange wilderness for anything in life.
Yeah, exactly. This is like just such a great metaphor for so many of things. And it really demonstrates and shows to you how much some of this patriarchal mindset is still driving and just so deeply ingrained in our culture and our society. So, I just think that there's so many people were projecting their fears onto us as we stepped out into this experience. And it really takes a lot of, is it confidence? I'm not exactly sure, but just like reassuring yourself, like, I've got this. And I think I was so impressed with your vulnerability of being able to say, guys, I don't know anything. I'm just going to show up. And trusting that I had created a community in this trip of the four of us that could hold all the different roles in the space that we needed to. So it was very intentional who was invited, and recognizing that we all complement each other with different skill sets. And really for you come in with such a strength of mindset and perspective, and also a freshness that, many of us the other three of us had done these types of things before. And so when you're seeing things, you're seeing them with a fresh set of eyes that maybe it's inspiring to me to be able to go out. So I appreciated the vulnerability.
My running list of things that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Every other sentence. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means.
There's a whole language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Off the couch. We're all off the couching it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, where were we in our conversation here?
Who knows? I think it was the contrast. We were talking about contrast from other people. So now let's talk about, I don't want to say courage, but okay. First of all, why would somebody put themselves in an uncomfortable situation? So I'm a huge fan of learning through experience. Okay. And people, you can listen to a book, you can read a book, you can listen to a podcast, you can attend the workshops, you can take notes. And I often tell people, you have to act. And then when you do, all the shit will come up and you're going to see what you have to work through. And a lot of people like to stay in the spiritually entertainment. Like they love to read the books and do all those things. And they've gathered the data, but they're not implementing or embodying it. And that's why I'm a huge fan of experience and taking action. And this was that on steroids. So what did you learn once you were there? What did you learn about yourself? And I know you talked a little bit about wanting to make me comfortable when I was emotionally uncomfortable. So what did you learn about yourself when you were there?
Yeah, a lot. And these experiences always, whenever I go out, I just always feel like I come back, and then there's a process of really diving into the lessons and really understanding what it is that came up for me. But I think that, there were a variety of different things. One is just to trust the process and trust each other. And I really struggle with trust. Trust of other women in particular is something that has been really, really challenging, and something that I have had to very actively work on to create in my life. And so creating, trusting that everybody here could really hold their own emotionally and hold their space was a big part for me. I also really felt responsible for people's comfort and kind of the outcome of the trip. And because I'd been there before, I was the one really convening. I felt like I had to work with my sense of responsibility for making everybody comfortable. So I just think about the number of times that we're sitting in the kayak and we're watching a whale, and you're looking at me, you're like, Morgan, where's that whale going to come up? Morgan, where's the whale coming? Is it going to be over here? Is it going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. That's part of the experience. It could be right next to you. It could be way away. And, to me, I think you reflected to me that my calmness and confidence of being in the presence of these beautiful animals, which you're terrified of, was part of what helped you to feel calm. But I could feel myself really wanting to say, Heather, what can I do to make you feel more comfortable right now in this moment? But then also recognizing that there's really nothing that I can do, and you need to sit with your discomfort and move through the emotions of that experience so that you can come out on the other end and have whatever growth and experience you need to. So I tend to be somebody who really wants everybody to be happy, to be comfortable, to be, having a positive moment. But I recognize that in doing that, I'm also taking away from other people's opportunity to really grow and dive in. So that was something that I felt myself struggling, or not struggling with, but constantly managing. Like, oh, it's pouring down rain. We're very, very wet. Like, is Heather okay? And wanting to like mother you in a way, but also backing off and going, no, she needs to ask. If she needs help, she will ask for help, and being okay with holding that space and that discomfort.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like for you?
Well, it's interesting because I never had, I don't want to say the same experience as you. Like my expectations were very different. I think it was the not even realizing that other people want to mother me or keep me safe or like comfortable. It was just expressing, right? So I'd be like, Morgan, and I remember, the other ladies would ask you same things about whales or something else. You're like, I don't know everything. Or like the boats. Morgan, what kind of boat is that? You're like, I don't know.
Where's that boat going, Morgan? I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know.
But then at the same time, you'd be like, oh, there's a whale. And I'd be like, okay, let's go. Right. Because I had this excited shitless moment where I kept saying, the only reason why it scares me is because it's something I can't control. And it's so powerful. And I remember that moment. There was one moment where I heard the blowhole of a whale and it scared the crap out of me. But it was this power of, and I felt very emotional, like that sense of gratitude, like that moment of surrender where there's something bigger than you. And you just have to trust it. You have to trust that you are safe. You have to trust that it has your back and it's not here to hurt you. And it's very graceful and elegant. And you're just so close but vulnerable to it as well. So there was that. But anytime I expressed discomfort, in my mind, I never had an expectation that anybody needed to keep me safe. And I think what I loved was that, and whether you were experiencing the same thing or not, my experience of that was that you could just sit and hold space with my discomfort, and you weren't, or it didn't perceive that you were actively trying to take my pain away. But I know that if you did actively try to take it away, I would have told you to back off and been like, I'm fine, which I think maybe I did once. I was like, Morgan, I'm fine. If I need anything, I'll tell you. And then I said, there was one moment where you're like, I want you to have a good time. And I'm like, and I don't want to disappoint you. So I'm like trying to paddle. And I was like, oh God, two traumatized people just pinging off of each other. But I just knew that if I over communicated, right? So I said, today I'm going to be quiet. I'm just powering through mentally. I feel fine. Don't take it personally. Like my energy might be lower or just calmer than usual. This is, so I just tried to communicate that. But again, probably because I'm trying to do the same thing as you are, which is, I want you to know I'm okay. Like it's such a mind game. And then the woman thing is interesting because I think we all have experience with other women, but maybe it's the work that I do because I'm so used to meeting new women all the time. I can be in groups of very different people all at once who have very opposing beliefs or experiences. And I'm typically okay with that. I have received a lot of curiosity from other women of how did you show up when I didn't even know there was 4 people. At first I was like, is there more people? You're like, nope, just the 4 of us. I had no idea. I didn't do research on these people. Again, I was like, my intention going into it was, it will be great. It will be great. And I don't know. The belief is like, we will all get along. Everyone will be fine. I found it interesting with the freshness of how, because I kept saying to you, like, where I live, people don't do this. And how it was so natural for all of you to this is what you, not to this extreme, but every weekend you can go and do adventure. But sometimes sitting in silence or doing what I do would be radically uncomfortable. And so it's intriguing to me how comfort shows up in different ways based on our lifestyle. so that was another reason why it was really cool to just see all of us as moms as well, showing up for ourselves in different ways. So yeah, the rain day was not comfortable. I was like, if it fucking does this for the rest of the week, I'm going to be radically quiet. But I will tell you, I kept, like, I knew that everything was temporary, just like an emotional wave. So, you know, when you're in there and you're like, this sucks right now, I'm like, you know, we were counting 1, 2, 1, 2, like just paddle, keep paddling. And it really allowed me to be focused. And I remember I didn't cry the whole trip until I got to the boat, and I bawled my eyes out. And it was this, I was surprised. And I was like, what is this? But it was this feeling of empowerment. And I directly related it to like chemo and how I didn't have an option, right? You didn't have an option. I was in it. And it was just like, you have to go through something. And that's what I love about it too, because when you have an out, it's easy to give up. It's easy to back out of a goal. It's easy, like you just have to go through the process. And sometimes there were moments of like, this sucks. And then the clouds would part and we got our hot drinks and we ate our next meal and we had a really good conversation. And I was like, ooh, this is fun. Like I'm back in gratitude. And it's just the emotional wave of ups and downs, which is exactly what happens on any journey. But I think the difference for a lot of people is when you give yourself an out, you literally cut off the success and then you start to lose trust in yourself. And so that's why it's so important to like follow through, but it's so easy culturally to back out of shit when you're, you know, when you got an easy out, or you can cancel your credit card or say, I'm not going to go to the gym anymore, or I'm just going to disengage with those calls. I couldn't do that here.
Yeah, that's such a good reflection, because I think, you know, there are days when the bugs were really bad, or like, I just think about the first day when we were paddling in and we were all so exhausted and fighting a current, and we really just had to like put our heads down and just focus on the next paddle stroke. And sometimes you're going along and really all you can do is think about 1, 2, 1, 2. I remember we were paddling and you're like, Morgan, it's so much easier if we talk. And I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, I'm in the back and I was working really hard. And you're like, Morgan, what's your big why? And I'm like,
I go to the deepest soul-based question. You're like, I can't talk about that.
I can't do it. So I think we spent an hour talking about my bearded dragon. And
yes.
just, you know, but like it was that experience of like, this is really hard. It's very physically uncomfortable, but you have to constantly come back and trust that your body can do that next stroke, and you can do that next stroke, and you can make it to the next point. And having that experience to me of just putting the next foot forward or the next paddle stroke forward and feeling that deep fatigue, but knowing I can keep going and that there's another boat with me that's also doing the same, is just such a great metaphor for life. Like you said, that sometimes it feels incredibly uncomfortable, and that you really do need to just kind of dig in and just keep moving forward. Just take that next step.
Yeah.
Let go also of one of the things that we did do is that we went in with a plan. We're like, okay,
I had no idea what the plan was.
Yes, I did.
I saw the map and I was like, okay, I wasn't attached to the plan. I was like, just fucking show up, get in that boat.
Yeah, which is lovely. You know, as somebody who's been in that area, who really knows it, has connection with all these different places, I had this idea of what I thought the process was going to be, where we were going to go. We had a paddling plan. And on the first day, after a very hard and long paddle, we looked at each other and we said, plan is out the window. We're releasing the objective of getting all the way to the end of the fjord and watching, you know, the glacier. Instead, what we are choosing together is an experience where we can have more time to sit on the shore and watercolor, more time for conversation, more time to just relax into the place instead of really leading with that push energy and trying to get to our objective, which so for me, it felt like at that moment, we went from a very masculine go energy and shifted instead into a much more feminine, like, let's co-create with the experience that we really want to have and create space for ourselves to truly sink down into it. I think all of us could have pushed through. We could have just gone. We could have and we would have been unhappy and miserable. But instead, we let go of that first expectation and allowed our path to diverge. And I think in life, so often we have an idea of where we're supposed to go. And we think taking the next step is always like, oh, you have to be focused on that thing. And recognizing that there can be a divergence that is a better experience for you in that moment. And that it doesn't always have to be the maximum push.
Yeah.
Doesn't, you'll have days like that first day when we went in, we're like, let's test the waters. Let's see how it feels to push for a 20-mile paddle. And
no, I never committed to that.
And then by the end, we were able to evaluate and be like, is this the experience we want to have? And we collectively decided, no, it's just not. And so I often think about that in my life. It's like, okay, where am I pushing towards an objective that I think I'm supposed to be doing, or I think I'm going to benefit from? And what does it mean to change course? And it's not saying that you're letting go of the experience, but you are just allowing for it to be a little bit different.
Yeah. And I think like that experience, I went in because I had a very different attachment. But it reminded me a lot of like energetic time management and how people always have these questions of like, I didn't get everything done. Like I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah. But watching the energy that you're approaching something with, it's always about the energy. And how I felt after this experience, one, I kept telling you throughout the week of how proud I was of my body. Because, and you even noticed that from when you and I went on a trip a few years ago, and I've been working consistently, not hard, consistently on strengthening my body, but also fueling my body differently. And I wasn't, by the end of the night, I was never fatigued around like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Like that was so hard. Or the next day, I didn't wake up like ridiculous, like, oh my God, how can I get back in a paddle? So it was this sustainable pace. But I think at the same time, you're restoring your soul, right? You're restoring you said rehydrating yourself. And it reminds me of when people say they're going on a vacation and they need a vacation from their vacation. And I'm like, but aren't you going on this trip, whatever your objective is on any trip? But most of the time people are going on a trip to escape their daily life and wanting restoration, wanting rehydration, wanting to feel restored, but they're bringing the same energy and mindset to that experience that they are in their everyday life, and then wondering why they're burnt out, which is it's the energy and how you approach it. So when I'm teaching people about energetic time management, and I'm like, listen, you're going to fuck up. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have to throw away the plan. It's going to be messy. So all your imperfection is going to come out. But the whole point is exactly what we experienced. You have your plan. You implement the plan. You reflect and go, ooh, that was too much. Okay. Then you reevaluate and you constantly reevaluate. And that's what you do in your day. That's what you do in your week. When you say, this is too much, I'm not getting everything done, then let go of it. And I know you and I have talked about this. I'm sure the other ladies agree. I mean, everything that we had to fit in our kayaks, and we had hot drinks, we had food, we had a limited pair of underwear and some layers, some base layers, mid layers, 150s, 250s. that I've learned about. And we just had a few, meaty items that we had to wear over and over and over again. So the basics of what we needed to survive, but also enjoy ourselves. And then you come home and you're like, look at all of this crap. Look at all of this excessive stuff that we have that we think we need. And the reason why we're so overwhelmed is because when I need a pen, and I know there's 100 laying around my house, but I don't know where they are. But if I only had like 1 or 2 pens and they were in the exact same spot as always, it's like the excess that we have that we think we need. So, yeah, I know we could talk forever, but if there's any last minute things you want to say.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk forever about this trip. I just think that I think one of the themes that came up was just being brave in your life to say yes to an experience, being brave in your life for me to be a guide to others, being brave to trust that everything you need is going to be able to fit inside of this tiny little kayak and also now returning back into life, coming back into, the space of a little bit of overwhelm. I think both of us, like you said, have felt that, where you come back and you're like, well, all I needed was this tiny little thing. I always knew where everything was. And now I just have so much stuff. And so being brave in confronting that, being brave in taking those next steps forward of whatever the next thing is in our lives, and just being open to whatever comes, and being open to seeing those contrasts and being okay with that experience.
Yeah. And the importance of, you just said it, but the importance of simplicity, and not just the physical stuff, but reevaluating how we're doing our work as well. And if you have control over that, but even if you don't have control over it, say you work for somebody else, just leading and using your voice and having suggestions around how we can make other people's lives simple. We didn't talk much about, I don't know about you, but even the reentry. So my children left at the same time that I left. They went to camp. And at the time that we're recording this, my children haven't been home either. And it's been interesting because wanting to come back and use my children as an excuse has been intriguing. So that piece of me, that identity, is still there. And my resistance is still there. Why I can't work out or why I can't do whatever. And my typical would be the kids. And I'm like, I can't even use that as an excuse right now. Yeah. And so I'm realizing, and I've been talking to my husband about this, how much we're talking about simplicity and overwhelm, how much we use our identity to overwhelm us to avoid feeling good. It's been interesting because it's so, I'm going to be unpacking this for a while, but I think when we get to a place of simplicity and alignment in our own lives, and there's so much contrast in every other person that you meet, it's a challenge to hang on to that.
Yeah.
So where can people find you? What do you have coming up? How can they get a piece of Morgan in their lives?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I would love to connect with folks who enjoyed this story and this journey. I'm most active on Instagram right now. So at Morgan Ruff Uplift, and that's rough like a dog bark, not rough like the texture, RUFF. And, I have a number of things that I am doing right now. And a lot of those I share on Instagram. I think coming up, the most notable thing that I will be doing is hosting another nature-based retreat. So remember at the beginning, I talked about how sitting quietly in nature in the rain this last spring really was what gave birth to this experience and this idea for me. And I do these on the quarter, every change of the season. So this one will be for the fall equinox. And fall is all about creative destruction, releasing those things, allowing yourself to shed and let go of whatever it is that you've been holding on to so that you can get ready for the winter season, which is that quiet kind of the seeds are deep in the ground and gestating. So I love the fall, and it's really a powerful time of the year. I think so many of us, we have children returning to school, and it's almost like the new January in many ways, where you are setting new intentions. So this is an opportunity to do that. And I would love to invite anybody who's interested to join. We do have a little bit of Zoom, but really it's mostly self-led. And I encourage people to go find a place in their own local home area and really connect in. And with that connection comes a deeper connection to yourself. And there's exercises and journaling and meditations that we provide that helps you to really find that deeper connection and hopefully begin to uncover that deeper voice, that whisper that's deep inside each of us that many of us are denying. So that will be September 23rd. There's an Eventbrite. You can sign up via Eventbrite, and really encourage anybody who's interested in creating that connection to, if you're just interested, just feel free to DM me. And also, I know that there will be more adventures coming up in the future. So if you're interested in getting on the wait list for any of those, send me a DM and I will add you to the wait list for 2022 Alaska adventures.
Perfect. Yeah. So you have your handle here if they're watching the video. So Morgan Ruff Uplift. Go follow her on Instagram. I'm assuming the link is in the bio on Instagram for your event.
Correct.
And it is, you didn't really say it. Well, you kind of did, but it is virtual. Like you can live anywhere in the world, but it's self-led and there is some connection piece as well. So it is live portion, but you're not sitting on Zoom the whole time. So it gives you some structure to implement yourself, but also some guidance. And I highly, highly recommend that for anyone. So yeah, I always like when people, and you also have a podcast, right?
Yes. Wild Women, Wild Soul. I'll be, I just released an episode which I talk about some of the mindset pieces that I had to go through in order to get myself to Alaska. So awesome. That's a really great one. And I will be obviously doing a lot more reflection and talking about this experience over the next little bit. So I would love anybody who's interested to follow me there too.
Thank you. Yeah, I really feel like I always say there's a fourth trimester in anything. It's the processing just continues to unfold. And that's part of trusting the process, where you don't have to overanalyze everything. Just know you've changed, and you will feel that in your own life. So thank you for guiding me, Morgan.
Thank you for putting your trust in me and in all of us and in this experience and saying yes. She said yes.
It's like a marriage proposal.
Well, that's it. And I wanted to thank you for listening today, because I truly believe you are exactly where you need to be. And now I have a favor to ask. In exchange for the value you've gained from this free podcast, I'd be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Share the show with at least one woman in your life who you feel would benefit, and or take a screenshot and share it on social media. And always feel free to tag me at Heather Chauvin. The world does not benefit from your guilt and fatigue. The world needs more women who are willing to unlearn everything they've been taught. Women who are courageous enough to feel good and not let guilt run the show. I believe you are that courageous woman. To see if my community and coaching is the right fit for you and your big vision, the relationships you desire, the money, time, energy that you know deep down you are capable of creating, then head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me. That's Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me, and take the next step in the right direction. Taking a stand for how you feel means you are taking a stand for how your children show up as adults. And if you have a personal question or topic you'd like me to answer on the podcast, text me 313-710-5180. 99. 313-710-5199. You are so worthy of feeling good. Now go do some scary shit.